Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Today is the day the NBA regular season kicks off, and we've been waiting for this for a long time, trying to navigate the drama of the offseason and how it would affect the regular season. Well, now we're going to find out firsthand. And Sap, right off the bat, on opening day, the Philadelphia 76ers are already experiencing drama, not that different than what they've been experiencing all offseason. But Ben Simmons, who just recently showed up, has also recently been kicked out of practice as news comes out today that he refused to participate in a defensive drill. Doc Rivers said, okay, see ya, and Ben Simmons left. He seemed to show up, Sap, not because he was interested in playing basketball or for the 76ers, but to stop getting fined. But because he got kicked out of practice today, he's going to just continue to rack up fines. He's suspended for their opening game. Sap, what the hell is going on here?
Well, I could see him not being happy if Doc Rivers asked him to partake in a shooting drill because he can't shoot, but defense is his forte, right? So he should have jumped at the opportunity to play defense, get involved in a defensive, skill set or whatever the hell Doc Rivers was doing there. It's a mess. It's an absolute mess. He came back because he wanted his money. He doesn't want to be there. You could just see from earlier practices that he had a puss on his face. He looked like a petulant kindergartner who didn't want to be in kindergarten.
With his phone in his pocket.
Yeah, which, he's multitasking. I mean, I'm addicted to my phone, so I get that. He's pretty chilled. He's from Australia, so he's got a nice vibe.
Is that a good way to get yourself in game shape, to practice in sweatpants with a cell phone in your pocket?
Well, maybe he's considering it a weight. It's
well, yeah. What scenario is that preparing you for?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe to text someone or tweet something out or contact his agent and say, "Get me the hell out of here." Look, we've been talking for months. Kyrie Irving for Ben Simmons. It makes too much sense. And now that Kyrie's talking about that he won't retire, I think that those two organizations should look into it. Now, would be a massive deal if one player accepts the move and is great at it. That team becomes the favorite in the East. And if the other player doesn't accept it and kind of mails it in for the season, then that team becomes an also-ran. Although I think anything with Kevin Durant and James Harden, me, you, and one other person could make them a contending team. But just think about Ben Simmons with the Brooklyn Nets and Kyrie Irving with the Philadelphia 76ers. I think both teams would be better. I mean, just picture Kyrie playing with Joel Embiid and picture Ben Simmons with Brooklyn giving them the things they don't have, namely defense. That would be a great deal for both teams. But it's such a risky deal because if Kyrie decides to punt on the season, now Philadelphia got nothing in return for Ben Simmons. They have to move him because this is just going to absolutely cripple their entire organization. It puts Doc Rivers in a tough spot. You have to move him at some point and try to get as much as you can for him. And look, Daryl Morey's a really good executive. He's also not afraid to take big chances. So I think something's going to happen.
The issue is they keep holding out hope that they're going to be able to trade him, for this bounty. And I mean, I don't know if Daryl Morey or the guy who owns the Sixers are just completely delusional. But, outside of Kyrie Irving trade, which I don't know that that's going to happen, Sap, because let me ask you this. Is the headache or the crazy person better than the headache or crazy person that you don't know? Do you really want to be trading these guys for each other and then having to deal with a whole new set of insanity? I don't know. What's your opinion on that, Sap? If you were running one of these teams, would you do it? Just be like, get me the different type of headache?
Well, if you don't think that Ben Simmons is going to be engaged this year in Philadelphia and you can't get a bounty for him, take a chance with Kyrie Irving, because I think Irving would be great with Joel Embiid. It's not so far from his home. I mean, he lives in New Jersey. It's, I think, a 90-minute drive to Philadelphia. So it's not like he's being traded to the Denver Nuggets or some other place where he may not want to go. And as far as Ben Simmons, he's just not going to play in Philadelphia if he's pulling stunts like this right away. And him going to Brooklyn, where he becomes clearly the third wheel and just has to kind of concentrate on playmaking, defense, rebounding, things he's really good at. He wouldn't have to score with Kevin Durant and James Harden. Look, both guys have a lot of money still owed to them, especially Ben Simmons, 4 years, $147 million. Is he just going to give that up? We know Kyrie can opt out at the end of the season, or he can opt in and get an extra year with Brooklyn. And who the hell knows with Kyrie? I mean, he had that Instagram post last week where he talked about he's not going to retire. So if you can believe him, which again, that's a leap of faith to believe what Kyrie Irving is saying, because he contradicts himself like within a matter of 15 seconds. He'll say one thing and 15 seconds later, he completely contradicts himself. But if he is going to play this year, not retire, then Brooklyn has to move him. That trade would be absolutely awesome. I mean, it could blow up in both teams' faces. It could make both teams better. It would be kind of wild. And meanwhile, the Milwaukee Bucks, who were the defending champions that no one talks about, just kind of sitting tight, going on their own merry way, would still probably be the favorites to represent the Eastern Conference, because there'd be two huge X factors in Brooklyn and Philadelphia.
Yeah, no, for Milwaukee, they're loving all of this. I mean, It's playing out perfectly for them. They're the two teams that are the biggest competition in the East. Are imploding right now, and the season hasn't even started yet. So Milwaukee is, they're a cohesive unit. They've got everything under control, and I think they're loving every single bit of this. But it's just remarkable to see how with every given day, both the Kyrie Irving and the Ben Simmons situations continue to deteriorate and hit new lows. And I don't know if you saw this, Sap, but while I was just sitting at the car dealership picking up a new car for my wife, all they had on TV was TMZ, and they had a story about Kyrie Irving playing pickup football the other day. So that's typically not something you would do if you're ready to play in the regular season and risk, injury. So it doesn't seem like he is anywhere close to being like, yeah, I'm just going to take the vaccine and, get the money. I think he's just like, I'm going to live my life like I normally would, save the playing basketball for the Brooklyn Nets. So I don't see.
He is the Odell Beckham Jr. of the NBA, right? I mean,
except for Odell Beckham Jr. is not like a cult leader, Sep. That's the difference. I get the talent comparison,
the similarities, the talent level, and the lack
weird
of
personalities.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're so much alike. Look, exquisite to watch. I will say this till I'm blue in the face. Kyrie Irving is one of the 5 most enjoyable players to watch on the court. I mean, his skill set's otherworldly. It's incredible. And Odell Beckham is great to watch. Not very durable either. They're not reliable. That's not a good thing when you're trying to build an organization. But yeah, maybe Kyrie's going to jump and join the NFL. I mean, I would think Jerry Jones would be ready, willing, and able. Maybe the Cowboys need yet another wide receiver. I think he'd be damn good at it, although I don't picture Kyrie lasting a full season in the NFL. But yeah, who knows what Kyrie's doing? Who knows what Ben Simmons is doing? Like we said, Milwaukee's just kind of working their way forward as the defending champs because they have adults on the team, right? They've got a leader in Giannis who busts his ass every single day. And then your second and third best players, Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday, they're adults, right? I mean, those are guys Veterans, you can rely on. Veterans, they're going to show up and work their butts off every game. Like they may have a bad shooting night, right? And we saw that through the playoffs. Both guys struggled at times, but you know what? They still played defense. They still were engaged. That's one of the reasons that team won the championship. They all pulled in the same direction. Kevin Durant was going one way. James Harden was hurt in the postseason, and then Kyrie was hurt. So it was left for Durant to try to defeat, a three-headed monster in Milwaukee.
By the way, Sap, interesting tidbit about those 3 guys that you mentioned. None of them were high draft picks, for what it's worth.
Yeah.
And Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons, both the number 1 overall pick.
Absolutely.
I mean, read into that what you will. I know that you talk about that sort of stuff a lot, and I think it's a good point. But Giannis, Holiday, Middleton, none of them were lottery picks. Giannis was the highest picked of all those guys at 15. Holiday was 17. I think Middleton was like 30.
Second rounder. He was in the second round. Like yeah. And they were on there. And Middleton and Holiday are on their second or third teams. So they're like, I wouldn't call them journeymen because they're both all-star caliber players, but they fit perfectly because they're not trying to upstage Giannis. Giannis is the guy, but then Giannis isn't trying to keep his thumb on them. He's ready.
Well, there's no ego there, right?
With them. No, it just works perfectly. That's why that team won the championship because look, every basketball player has a massive ego as they should, but in the team concept, they really pulled together. And then they've got some really good role players. I think they're going to miss PJ Tucker, who offered a lot last year. The kind of guy that's difficult to replace because he's a defender, rebounder, kind of a glue guy. But you can find a player like that along the way. So, yeah, Milwaukee's sitting here just twiddling their thumbs, winning the argument by not speaking because the Nets and the 76ers are a cluster, right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And they have been all off season. It doesn't look like it's going to change with the season starting tonight. Brooklyn and Milwaukee do face off tonight, Sap. That is the first game of the doubleheader on TNT tonight. and in Milwaukee. So the Bucks will get their banner hung and get their rings. And I'm sure they're happy to do it in front of Brooklyn, who projects to be probably their biggest rival in the Eastern Conference. But that leads us all now, Sap, to our season preview, and I guess our season sort of predictions, which we'll do at the end of this show. Just going through what we think is going to happen for this 2021-2022 NBA season. Sap, do you want to start with the Western Conference, the Eastern Conference? Do you have a preference?
Do the West.
Okay, we're gonna go.
West.
You're dreaming about California dreaming, Sap. Your guys out west, LeBron James. That's why you want to start out there. We talked about some of the bottom teams in a podcast the other week, Sap. So I don't think we really need to, rehash the Timberwolves and the Thunder and the Rockets, all those teams. To me, if we're talking about the West, obviously the team to beat, in my opinion, is the Lakers. I don't think that there's really a second choice that is to come out of the West. To me, they're the favorites with a bullet.
Yeah, it's up to them, right? If this works out, they're able to get Russell Westbrook involved in the team concept and kind of keep him focused. And if Anthony Davis and LeBron remain healthy, which I think they will this year, because again, I think some of those injuries from last year may have had to do with the fact that it was a truncated season with COVID, and they had a very, very short off season, and Anthony Davis wasn't in shape going into last year. And look, LeBron's 37. The injury factors are going to happen. Not just the injury factor, but the recovery time takes longer when you're older. It's just the way it works. So yeah, they're clearly the favorite. In fact, in Vegas, the number 2 team in the West is Golden State, which I still can't quite fathom. I'm still not sure how people can put Golden State as the second best team in the Western Conference. They didn't even make the playoffs last year. They lost in the play-in
we'll
game.
talk more about them in a second, but I agree with you.
But that's where the West is. It's kind of like the Lakers. They will decide who wins the West. If they remain somewhat healthy, especially those 3 players that we mentioned, and they get those role players to kind of fit in and buy in, which I think they will, because LeBron's the best leader in the sport. They're the clear favorites to win this thing. The only X factor I would throw in there is Kawhi Leonard comes back during the season, then you got to, also expect the Clippers to be somewhat in contention. But everything I'm hearing is he's not going to come back till next year.
Yeah, and everything we know about Kawhi is he does not rush these things. He's on his own schedule. So, even if the team looks like, hey, it's pretty wide open in the West, maybe we can make a run. If Kawhi comes back to the playoffs, I think he'll say, nah, I'm just going to come back next year when I'm feeling 100%.
Yeah, this is not Jordan in 1986 coming back against the doctors and executives' wishes. Right. He's like, damn, no, I'm coming back to play, and I'm going to also set the playoff scoring record in the meantime.
So I would, if I was a betting person, I would say do not bet on Kawhi Leonard returning. So yeah, I think we both agree the Lakers are certainly the team to beat, and it's a very different looking Lakers roster than last season, Sap. They added a lot of guys this offseason. They added Carmelo Anthony, Trevor Ariza. They just yesterday acquired Avery Bradley off waivers. Wayne Ellington is in the mix. DeAndre Jordan, Malik Monk, Kendrick Nunn, Rajon Rondo's back, and obviously the biggest acquisition of the offseason, Russell Westbrook. Sap, do you think that, I know that, this team has a lot of veterans on it, but again, a lot of new pieces. Are the veterans going to be able to integrate these new pieces, do you think seamlessly, or do you think, could you see the first 2 months of the season, some growing pains for the Lakers?
There'll be some growing pains. Look, when LeBron joined the Heat, they were 9-8 after the first 17 games, and that looked like a team that was going to just breeze through the regular season and the postseason. They ultimately lost in the finals to the Mavericks, and those were 3 guys that were right in their prime. Sometimes when you bring in new pieces, especially high-end players. Now, Carmelo Anthony's no longer a high-end player, but he does have cachet as a future Hall of Famer. You got Rondo, you got Dwight Howard, who the one thing for the Lakers is, right. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can miss anybody. There's 15 guys on this roster who are all.
I feel like they have 30 roster spots, Sap.
Well, it
seems
like
they've added somebody every day.
They're deeper than the Rams and Chargers out in LA. But the other thing too about them is they have 15 players who are all top 8 or 9 players, right? Like generally, if you have a 15-man roster, the 15th guy just sits on the bench and will help out.
Yeah, I don't think they have a bum on their team.
They don't. I agree. I mean, Avery Bradley could be the 15th guy, and at some point in the season, he may contribute. Don't forget, 2 years ago, before the pandemic, he was playing really well. He had a huge game against the Celtics on a Sunday right before the pandemic struck. He was arguably the 3rd best player at that point. So you have a lot of these different players. Now, you're going to have load management, right? Because you're going to have to keep these guys sharp. It's a little different than a baseball roster where you get guys at bats, you can keep them all sharp with a bench, but they're even deeper than a baseball team. I mean, they have legitimately 15 players. So you have some load management with LeBron, Anthony Davis. I don't know how you load manage Westbrook. I think he'll push back on that. You can't. It's just not wired that way. But he could be the guy that energizes the team year round, right? Like he'll play 78 games, play 34 minutes a night, bust his ass.
I think that's why they got him, Sap, honestly, is to keep them afloat when LeBron and Anthony Davis inevitably either go down with injury or need rest. I think, because they looked at who's a guy, who we can actually acquire, who will be able to play a lot of games for us. And say what you want about Russell Westbrook. He's not efficient. Sometimes he's maddening. The guy's durable as hell. and he plays every game.
He plays his ass off too. I mean, especially in the offensive end. So yeah, that's what he's going to offer. And, the X factor to me is obviously integrating him. It's also Anthony Davis, because Anthony Davis 2 years ago when they won the championship was unguardable. I mean, he's that good, right? When he's right, healthy, playing in the right frame of mind, he's a top 5, top 6, top 7 player without question. I mean, we can argue about Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, who's the best big man. He's certainly the most versatile one, right? He could do everything on the basketball court. He's the best defender of those three. He's able to hit threes. He can put the ball on the floor. He's almost impossible, if not truly impossible to guard. So he's the guy that could be the X factor.
But he's the most up and down of the three in terms of one game he'll play like, holy crap, this guy is the MVP of the league. Next game he'll have 8 points and take 6 shots. You'll be like, why did he do that?
Right? Look like he doesn't even give a F, right? Like he's just like, is he really engaged? Well, we know Westbrook's going to bust his ass every night. We know LeBron can sail through and still be the best player on the court because of his wide-ranging skill set. So
the only question about LeBron is the durability.
Yeah, that's all. Because again,
when he's on the court, you know what he's going to do.
He's just fine. The thing is, a sprained ankle, which used to take 2 weeks to heal, now takes 2 months. That's what happens when you become 37, 38 years old. I mean, I'm 58. There's mornings I wake up, my left shoulder hurts. I don't know why. I didn't do anything, but it's hurt. That's what happens when you get old. You're still a youngin', Jet, so you don't have to deal with that stuff. But yeah, and then these other guys, whether it be Rondo and Avery Bradley and Howard and Carmelo and all these other guys, are all going to kind of fill roles. And I think it'll work because of LeBron. Like, right, he's the best leader in the sport, and I think he can keep everybody focused on what they have to do. He did it 2 years ago. Remember, we were talking about, they've got Rondo and Dwight Howard. How the hell is that going to work? And it worked because I think of LeBron. LeBron's the ultimate leader. I think he'll get everybody focused. And guys like Westbrook, who have never won a title, a guy like Carmelo, who's never won a title, they want to win right now. And this is their opportunity because, they don't have many years left. So I think it'll work out, but it's going to take time because no matter how much you want it to work, it still has to play out on the court so that they all fit into their particular roles and it all comes together.
Yeah, Sap, by my count, with Carmelo, Anthony Davis, LeBron, Dwight Howard, Russell Westbrook, that gives them 5 surefire Hall of Famers on the team. I mean, that's
5 top 75 guys. Yeah,
that's pretty crazy.
The league is going to unleash its top 75 players in the history of the league because it's the 75th anniversary. I think all 5 of those guys are on there. That's damn impressive, right?
I mean, only one of them is in their prime anymore, which is Anthony Davis. But I mean, it's still pretty damn impressive. But let's move on a little bit from the Lakers, Sap. Let's talk about sticking in the West because we're going to do the West first. Okay, you said the Warriors. Vegas has them in second. We both agree the Lakers are the team to beat. What teams in the West, in your mind, could realistically challenge them? Who could be a potential Western Conference Finals opponent? Who could potentially scare them in the playoffs? Let's say the Lakers are healthy. Let's take injury out of the equation. Who can match up with this team in the West?
Nobody. But there is one team that I think has a chance to really throw a scare into the entire process, and I'm probably going to surprise you with this. It's the Dallas Mavericks. I think Luka, again, gets better and better and better, and I know he's lost 2 consecutive years to the Clippers in the playoffs, but they didn't lose because of him. He was the best player in both series. He's electric. We both agree on that. I think
he's been phenomenal in the playoffs, too. Yeah, I mean, he's been amazing.
He goes up. I mean, he was great in the Olympics. He almost brought his country, Slovenia, to the gold medal. I mean, with 2 million people in the entire country. And I don't know who the second player on
his neighbor, his aunt was on the team.
His neighbor. Yeah. I mean, Melania Trump and Donald Trump's son, who's maybe could have played for Slovenia because she's from Slovenia, Melania Trump. Yeah. I don't know who was on the team, and he had them nearly win the gold medal. I think Porzingis looks like he seems primed for a good year, and I think the coaching change is actually going to help. I'm not saying Jason Kidd's a better coach than Rick Carlisle, but for this particular team right now, he'll be a better coach than Rick Carlisle. That's the team I think is going to have a massive jump. They played really well at the end of last year, and then they lost a tough 7-game series against the Clippers because the Clippers had 2 studs, whereas Dallas only had 1. And Mark Cuban's ready, willing, and able to make moves at the trade deadline that could maybe put them over the top. I think they have the highest ceiling of the other teams in the West because we keep looking at Utah and Denver and the Suns, who had every break in the world to get to the finals last year. I still think the Lakers would handle those teams in a 7-game series. I think that it handled Dallas as well in a 7-game series, but I think Dallas is the team to look out for in the West.
I think the thing is with Luka, he's so good that at the end of the season, we could say he's the best player in the Western Conference. We could say he's the best player in the league. He's on the precipice of that. But as we talked about, I think, either it's towards the end of last year, maybe at some point during the offseason, I'm sort of losing track of it. Besides Porzingis, okay, you think maybe he has a bounce back year. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. The roster sucks. I mean, Luka's great, obviously, but the rest of their roster, we're talking about how deep the Lakers are. This is the opposite of that. I mean, their roster is garbage, Sap.
No, it is. I mean, he's going to have to literally carry them as far as he can. Now, I think he's one of the few players in the league that can do that. Like we've seen LeBron do it in Cleveland multiple times. I'm not saying that Luka can be LeBron, but he has the widest breadth of skill of any player in the league, right? Because how many guys can score, rebound, and pass like that? I mean, obviously he's a liability on defense. That's the biggest difference between prime LeBron with prime Luka, which actually we're not even into prime Luka right now. Is the defensive end
really
of
not
the
even
court.
Close.
Yeah, he's still a baby. And so, but I think he can carry the team. And I just look at the West now. A few years ago, it looked loaded, and now I think it's kind of weak. And part of it is, James Harden and Kevin Durant went from the Western Conference to the Eastern Conference. Klay Thompson got hurt, and Kawhi Leonard's always hurt. So you kind of look at it and say maybe the East and West are more balanced than they've been in the past. So I just see a lot of teams behind the Lakers that have flaws, and I'm just going on the theory
star power.
I'm going to go with the star power that this guy is just going to get better in his 4th year and carry them. Kind of like Trae Young last year with Atlanta. Like things could fall into place, but Atlanta I think does have a better, or at least a deeper roster than Dallas.
Definitely, they do.
They do. I'm just hoping that Mark Cuban makes whatever moves necessary, and I would think that veterans that maybe get bought out of their deals look and say, hey, I'd be pretty cool to play in Dallas, great city, good sports city. Mark Cuban, cool owner. Jason Kidd, players like them, no income tax, and also the chance to play with Luka. Because I think players want to play with a guy like that who can make you better because he's such a great passer. So, yeah, it's more the star power because these other teams, they had their chance last year. Like Phoenix took advantage of it, right? And then we saw their flaws in the finals. Same thing with like Denver and Utah. Like I can't buy into Utah. Right? I think they'll always be contending.
They haven't shown anything that you should buy into. The regular season team.
Right, in Denver as well. They made it to the conference final 2 years ago, and then they lost to the Lakers. And look, we don't know when Jamal Murray's coming back, and I think Phoenix has some real issues with DeAndre Ayton's contract situation. That doesn't seem to be
talk about Phoenix, Sap, because they're the defending champions in the West. So talk about what they're going to look like this year.
I think they'll be good. I mean, I have them as the 4th best team in the Western Conference, but I have them slightly behind the Jazz, slightly ahead of the Nuggets and Warriors. I think those teams 3, 4, 5, and 6 are all going to be within probably 6, 7 games of each other. So, there'll be a good race to see who will be the 3rd seed. I just think that they'll take a step back this year. Chris Paul's a year older. Devin Booker progressed into a superstar last year, but everything fell into place for them last year, Jet. It really did. I mean, they played a Lakers team that was totally banged up and lost Anthony Davis, in the 3rd or 4th game. I think if Anthony Davis had been healthy, even 80% healthy and played through that series, the Lakers would have won that series.
I said that going into it.
Yeah,
I had them in that series. I thought it was over.
Necessarily, but I think if LeBron and Anthony Davis were like 80%, I think they win that series. They were up 2-1, the Lakers, and up 10 or 12 late in the second quarter, game 4. I'm like, this series is going to be over in 5 or 6. Right. Davis got hurt. And then he tried to come back and was never effective. I think he played like 6 minutes the rest of the series. If he had just stayed healthy, I think they would have won, let alone LeBron not being 100% healthy. So they caught a break there. They were able to beat the Clippers without Kawhi Leonard. They got to the finals, and Giannis was coming back from the knee, and they got off to a 2-0 start, and then it just didn't work out for them. So I think they'll take a step back. I do think that contract situation with DeAndre Ayton could weigh on him, could weigh on the organization. And look, I think when you lose in the finals, this happens
too, Sap. They're such a cheap organization. Robert Sarver is notorious for being cheap.
terrible owner. Yeah, he's not going to bite the bullet and add pieces to run for a championship. And the other thing too is a lot of times when a team loses in the finals, the next year they come back and they just don't have it, because the season is so long. It means your off season is short, and then you spend the off season questioning why you didn't win, and you lose some confidence. Really, in football, we see that all the time. Like, look, even the Kansas City Chiefs, they're 3-3 right now. They lost in the Super Bowl. The year before, the 49ers went 6-10 the year after losing the Super Bowl. In football, the only guy that loses a Super Bowl and comes back strong the next year is Tom Brady, right? I mean, he's done that. And really in basketball, the only guy that loses in the finals, and unfortunately has a lot of experience losing in the finals, but coming back the next year and contending is who? LeBron James.
That's why you can throw those guys out the window, because it's the
those guys are different.
Not the rule.
Those are the exceptions, not the rule. Normally, you lose in the finals, or you lose in the World Series. You're like, oh God, well, what? We should have done this. We should have done that.
There's a hangover.
There's a definite hangover, except for those two guys.
Well, it's fatigue too, Sap, right? You're playing the most games of any team besides the team that won it, and you don't get the boost of winning it. So, it's like we went through all this to just come up short. Tom
Brady's played 45. I know it's a basketball podcast, but what the hell? Why not bring up the greatest football player ever? He's played 45 postseason games. That's like another 3 years. Right. LeBron has played, I believe, 280 postseason games. That's like another 3.5 years.
Yeah.
Right. So just, again, let's set those guys aside. Yeah. You go to the finals, you lose, and you're like, oh, you've played 22 games, 24 games, whatever amount of games you've played, you lost. You don't have the juice to come back the next year, or you get off to a slow start. There's a hangover. Absolutely. So I think you might see that with Phoenix. But I 3 through 6 in the West, I think you could throw a blanket over those teams, and it comes down to health. And it comes down to which organizations are going to make mid-season moves to improve their teams. And again, I'm with you on that, Jet, that the Suns aren't going to be that team.
So if I'm asking myself the question that I asked you about who could, potentially challenge the Lakers, I like Denver. Mm-hmm. Let me explain why. I believe in the talent of Michael Porter Jr. to pair with the talent of Nikola Jokic, to pair with if Jamal Murray comes back from injury. We'll see what he looks like. But I think that's a legitimate big three of 3 all-star level players. We know that Jokic is the reigning MVP. Michael Porter Jr., I believe, has the talent to be an all-star, as is Jamal Murray. If they're all 3 healthy and engaged, and that's been the question, the health is a Jamal Murray question, the engagement is a Michael Porter Jr. question, then having that big 3, that trio, is at least something you can throw up against the Lakers having a trio. Mm-hmm. Lakers have a little bit more depth too, but the Nuggets have good depth as well. They have Will Barton, they have Campazzo. They have good players coming up.
Aaron Gordon is a nice player to call your fourth player, right?
He's
true. He's your fourth best player. That's not bad.
You got they took a rookie who people are high on, Bones Highland. So, I think they have some pieces there to be able to threaten the Lakers. Now, again, the big question is, will Jamal Murray be healthy towards the end of the season? Because we're not going to see him probably until after the All-Star break. And how engaged will Michael Porter Jr. be with this new mega extension he just got? I just, again, you're going with Luka is better than any of those players in that team. So I get going with the star. I'm just looking at it as the sum of their parts for the Nuggets, I think can challenge the Lakers. I still have the Lakers as the favorite. I wouldn't pick the Nuggets to beat them in a 7-game series. But if I'm looking at a team that could threaten them, that to me is the formula. A depth plus 3 potential star players, I think is something that can rival the Lakers.
That's a great point, Jeff, because not only the Nuggets, but also the Warriors, they're going to get a star player back at the trade deadline. It's like they're adding a player at the trade deadline.
Right.
The Nuggets with Jamal Murray, and obviously the Warriors with Klay Thompson. So if the Nuggets and Warriors can just kind of hang in there, even if they're 4th or 5th in the Western Conference, when those guys return, then they will elevate up with obviously the Lakers and I think the Mavericks. But we make a great point with Denver. We don't know
what Murray and Thompson are going to look like. That's the question. And especially, Murray, he's going to have missed a year. Thompson's going to have missed almost 3, Sap.
I forgot what Klay Thompson looks like. Like, he hasn't played since the finals in 2019, right? So again, he's one guy I buy into because I think he's a hard worker. He's a pro. And also his game, he almost feels like an NFL quarterback. Like, he could play till he's 40. He runs down the court, catches the ball and shoots. He's a catch and shoot guy. He doesn't dribble much. I think his defense isn't going to be as good as it's been over the years, and he's been an elite defender. But yeah, we don't know when guys are coming back after a period of time. Although for the most part, with modern medicine, these guys do recover, and still play at a high level. Look at Kevin Durant. I mean, he blew out his Achilles, and look, last year he looked like Kevin Durant. That's the way it is in the NBA. It's, even in the NFL, these guys recover from injuries, and the next year they're just fine. Forget about baseball, where they have Tommy John surgery and come back stronger. They're throwing 3 miles per hour faster than they did before the injury. So yeah, those are two teams that are going to be interesting, the Nuggets and the Warriors, because they're going to add a piece at the All-Star break or at the trade deadline that's going to maybe put them over the top and make them real contenders.
Yeah. All right. So a couple other teams, Seth, that we haven't talked about just to round out the Western Conference. If we're looking at sort of the bottom half of the bottom part of the playoff picture, I think a lot of people are expecting Memphis and New Orleans and maybe Sacramento to be interesting teams that are, sort of in the playoff mix this year. Of those three teams, because I feel like they're all kind of right in the same exact sort of spot, who are you highest on of those three teams?
I would say Memphis. I think John Morant continues to get better. I think he's going to be an all-star this year. He's an elite player. He's got a great attitude. They've built a really good culture. They play tough defense, and that will work throughout the regular season. There's going to be nights when the other team isn't really there, not ready to be competitive, and the Memphis Grizzlies will steal some wins. I think that they'll be a team that finishes 7th or 8th. As far as New Orleans, I was high on them, and then now we're seeing, Zion is not going to start the season. And how durable is Zion? How many games is he going to play? Also, losing Lonzo Ball, I think, was a huge loss for them. I thought he played really well last year and had a nice rapport with Zion, and now that's gone. So it's falling on Zion and Brandon Ingram. They did make the coaching change, which I think is an improvement. Anybody other than Stan Van Gundy is an
That's
improvement.
what you were calling for all last year. Anybody
but Stan Van Gundy is an improvement on the coaching sideline. And I like Stan Van Gundy, but I think the game's really passed him by. I think he's a good commentator. I like him on Twitter. Politically, he's even to the left of us, if that's possible.
Yeah, but it was a horrible fit last year.
It's a horrible fit. Yeah, get a dynamic coach to go with this dynamic player, not a guy who looks like Ron Jeremy. So I think that they may fall a little bit short, but it all depends on how many games does Zion give you. I mean, if Zion can give you 65, 70 games, then I think they'll qualify. He's off to a phenomenal start as a pro.
Well, this is the team people are waiting on, right? Sap, this is the NBA. Yeah. This is what the NBA is. Hope they want the Pelicans to be good.
Absolutely. I mean, I wrote a column last year. I'm going to probably stick with this idea. He could be the face of the league in a few years. And I'm not being xenophobic here. It's tough to have a foreign guy as the face of the league, whether it's right now. I think Giannis is the best player in basketball. I think Luka is right on his heels as far as especially the young players, but they're foreign players. I think it's difficult for a foreign player to be the face of the league. I don't want to get criticized like Stephen A. Smith got criticized. Right, yeah. And I agree. But I get what Stephen A. Smith was talking about. Right.
No, I know. I mean, you can't say anything without people.
No, you can't say anything. It's like, again, my famous statement, my only famous statement is what is and what should be two totally different things. I couldn't care less who the face of the league is. If Giannis is the best player, God bless him. But I think the face of the league tends to be an American player. Sorry.
Right. There's a difference saying the difference is there's a difference between saying I don't want Luka to be the face of the league versus
I don't think
will people accept him as the face of the league? Yeah, those are two completely different thoughts.
Wasn't Hakeem Olajuwon the best player in the league for several years? He was never the face of the league.
No.
Even he was
Michael Jordan was the face of the league when he was out of the league.
When he wasn't playing. He's still kind of the face of the league, and he hasn't played since 2003. Seriously, I mean, he outsells everyone in sneakers, right? Sells more sneakers than anyone. My 5.5-year-old Brandy gets a pair of Jordans every year for Christmas. She's 5.5. She saw Space Jam with Michael Jordan. She liked it better than the one with LeBron, and I'm never speaking to her again.
Yeah,
but she's been
excommunicated.
She's out of my will, which actually I don't have a will because I have nothing to give. But that's my only point with that. So Zion, I think the league's like, this guy, we want him to be the face of the league. He's charismatic. He's got a dynamic game. He's just such an easy guy to rub. To me, he's like the opposite of Ben Simmons. Like Ben Simmons is a sourpuss. Zion has this big smile. You just want to hug him, right? He almost has like a David Ortiz feel to him. Like you just can't help but root for the guy.
Right.
But again, if he's not healthy, that's a problem.
Yeah. No, I mean, as he goes, they go. And it hasn't translated to a lot of wins so far, but that's the team and the player that everybody's waiting on to make a move and be, an actual contender in the West
Yep.
because they have this guy that people have been hearing about and seeing the highlights of. And like you said, when he plays, he plays phenomenal and is dominant. And, he's putting up historic efficiency numbers and he can handle the ball, but he just needs to be healthy. So, that's an interesting team. Like you mentioned, Brandon Ingram, too, a young all-star level player. We'll see how they continue to grow. They also have a ton of draft picks coming their way, but I think a lot of people are waiting for them to merge. I agree with you. The Grizzlies are an interesting team. John Morant, a very dynamic player. Jaren Jackson Jr. just got a big contract extension, didn't play much of last season because he had an injury, but he's a guy that a lot of these GMs are trying to find, the 6'10" guy who can handle the ball and shoot threes and play in the post and do everything, block shots. So he should be the perfect type of running mate for John Morant. We'll see what happens there. Sap, the other teams that just before we finish out the Western Conference that we should just touch on really quick. We talked about the Clippers, what they look like without, we kind of know what they are without Kawhi Leonard. The Blazers and I'm sorry, I'm missing one other team here that we didn't talk about. Well, let's just talk about the Blazers then, Sap. Forget the other teams. Portland's had a weird offseason with the will he, won't he commit Damian Lillard situation. What do you think their ceiling is this year, Sap?
He's committed, because he's a pro, right? Like he's maybe not 100% happy there. Now he's committed.
But it took some time for the commitment. It did, right?
It did. But he never was like Ben Simmons or Kyrie Irving. Because he's not a
dick.
No, he's a pro, right? So, and he's
the Jazz are the other team I wanted to talk about too.
Yeah, the Jazz are weird. I mean, they had the best record in basketball last year, but we never really felt they were going to win the title. We just figured they'd lose along the way, which is what the Jazz do. I mean, I'm trying to compare. They feel like the Washington Nationals until they finally won the World Series. Like the Nationals every year had like 97 wins, great staff, awesome lineup, and then they'd lose in the first round of the playoffs in the divisional series. And then you kind of get the same thing with Utah. But Dame's committed to get CJ McCollum. They never really make offseason moves to get better. So, if Ben Simmons gets moved, is that a place Ben Simmons end up? Could it be Ben Simmons for CJ McCollum? Now, if you get Ben Simmons engaged with Dame Lillard, that's a pretty good team. I mean, that could be a factor in there. So, but I look at them as a team that maybe has to go through the play-in, and those, that scenario is very dangerous. So we'll see how that progresses. But there could be a team that you definitely want to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. And as far as Utah, I think they'll have another excellent regular season. They're very hard to beat at home. And I expect them to flame out in the playoffs. I think that it'll be a lot of the same thing. I love Donovan Mitchell. I don't love Rudy Gobert so much.
Me neither. I think even his great defensive ability, I think, is overrated. Like Simmons should have been Defensive Player of the Year last year because he can guard anybody on the court. And I've seen many games, Rudy Gobert. I think in one game, I think Ben Simmons lit him up for 42, which is an embarrassment that Ben Simmons scored 42 against him.
I mean, how many teams' best player is the guy that Rudy Gobert is going to be guarding? Maybe like 3? And, maybe when he faces those guys, they torch him.
Yeah, I mean,
Embiid put him in a body bag.
Oh God,
Jokic
I think
lit him up.
I think he had 42. Yeah, Jokic had. Yeah, no, he's whatever. He's one of those guys that will win the Defensive Player of the Year for some reason. You know what? He's probably going to end up being a Hall of Famer. Like Ben Wallace would win the award, but you'd watch and say, yeah, that guy is the real deal. I watch Rudy Gobert and go, yeah, he blocks a few shots and whatever, but
I don't know. So I don't know what's going to happen with Donovan Mitchell because it's hard to believe anybody will spend their whole career in Utah. It just doesn't seem like it's, that type of market for that, though, Stockton and Malone spent
unless Dwayne Wade has a major say in personnel or as part
owner. But I feel like
Mitchell
Mitchell wants to win a title really bad. He strikes me as that type of person who's maniacal about winning.
Yep, absolutely.
So I could totally
he's got Kobe
see him
Bryant type
at
mentality.
Point.
Yeah, at some point saying, and he's from the East Coast.
I think he'd be a great second fiddle on a title team.
Yes, perfect guy. Exactly. He like his idol. I mean, Dwayne Wade's his favorite player.
Yep.
Dwayne Wade was the best player on a championship team, but he was perfect as not at the beginning, but in the 2 championship years, he was perfect as LeBron's Robin, and he accepted.
And they also the year he won when he was the best player on the team. That team was freaking loaded. That Heat team.
Oh,
I mean,
Gary
talk about
Payton.
deep. That team was
Gary
insanely
Payton,
deep.
Antoine Walker. You had Shaq, still not quite Shaq.
James Posey, Jason Williams. I mean, they were loaded.
Yeah. well coached, obviously with Pat Riley, and Shaq was probably 85% of his prime,
Yeah,
which is still awesome. So yeah, that was a loaded team, and you were playing a Dallas team that just kind of choked a
mediocre.
little bit in that series, and yeah, it was Dirk and a few other guys.
So yeah, I think, so that's a prediction for the future, but I don't think Donovan Mitchell spends his career in Utah.
Right.
Sap, before we move to the Eastern Conference, just a quick little thing I looked up. You were talking about the Michael Jordan shoe sales and stuff like this. Last year, 2020, shoe sales, Michael Jordan sold $130 million worth of his signature shoe. The next closest was your guy, LeBron James, with $32 million. So, Michael Jordan outsold him by about $100 million. Kevin Durant.
That's what they made. I think that's what they made. They sold more than that.
That's what they made. Sorry, correct. They made. That's what they made. $130 million.
Is that crazy?
LeBron made $32 million.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Durant
amazing.
26, Steph Curry 20, Kobe Bryant shoe 16, James Harden's Adidas shoe 14, Zion 13 million, and Dwayne Wade has a Chinese shoe deal with Li Ning. He made 12 million off of it. But yeah, Michael Jordan, I mean, all those guys combined, I mean, that doesn't reach.
And it goes up every year with Jordan. Like I think the next year it will be 160 million. He has like this built-in.
It's not close.
Escalator. No, it's not. He's still the biggest athlete in this country. I look, Brady and LeBron are awesome, and Mahomes and Rodgers in football, and pick whoever else. And he's still the biggest name. I mean, he's the most recognizable. Who the hell would get the ratings that he got on a documentary about a team from 23 years ago?
No, it's wild. He's like, he's like some sort of like godlike figure. Really, he is. That's what he's become.
Like Shannon Sharp, I know you're not a big fan of Shannon. I am. Shannon loves LeBron like I do. But he said he's the one guy that when he met him, he was in awe of him. It's almost as if the guy, levitated. Like he just was, he didn't seem human. Like when he walked into the room, it was like, that's Michael Jordan, and people just are in awe of him. And I've met a lot of great basketball players. I've met, Donald Trump as a president. I've met all sorts of famous people. When I met Michael Jordan, he was in his first few years in the league, and it was in a locker room setting, and there was 20 of us around his locker sticking a microphone in his face. I never really got the one-on-one interaction, but from what I understand, he's the one guy that when you meet, it's like, holy crap. I think the other one you hear a lot about that as well as Bill Clinton. Like when people meet Bill Clinton, they go,
some people do have just like an aura about
just have an aura about him.
I remember my mom said, my dad used to promote concerts. I think I told you that, Sap. And my mom, so my mom would go backstage to all of them, met a ton of, famous musicians and stuff like that. But she said the one that stuck out, Stevie Wonder, she said had like a aura about him. It was like almost like meeting somebody who wasn't really a human being.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I got to meet, I covered the 2016 primary in New Hampshire, and they had the Republican debate on a Saturday night. And they brought out some of the candidates. They brought out, I think it was Ben Carson, some of the other candidates. Right. But as soon as Trump walked out, he took command of the entire room. And Jet, I'm not talking about a small room. I'm talking about like a high school gymnasium, with 1,000 reporters and
some people are no, he just have that. It's a magnetic thing.
There's Ted Williams had it, from what I've been told. Like Ted Williams walked in the room and everybody else was just in awe of him. I think Brady has that. Some of the great quarterbacks, you just walk in and they're like, "Oh, that guy's." You ever be in a situation where you just kind of look at someone, so that guy's somebody? Like you can't pinpoint it. Even they may not be a famous person, but there's somebody. They look successful unless they're con men, right? But you get that feeling that like this guy's a somebody. They just carries himself a certain way, the way they're dressed, the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they carry themselves.
Yeah, I think that is, some people have that sort of magnetism about them, and
cachet. How's that?
Obviously, that's a good one. That's a good one. And obviously, Michael Jordan does. All right, let's move to the Eastern Conference, Sap, as we continue our preview for this 2021-2022 season that kicks off tonight. Last year, it was the Philadelphia 76ers who won the regular season. Obviously, we know the Bucks are the reigning champions. With all the tumult going on, which is another good word, Zap, tumult.
I like that word. That's a good word.
Thank you. In Brooklyn, I think their status has been lowered a little bit to contender in the East, not surefire thing. Milwaukee, Brooklyn. Maybe you could convince me that if Philadelphia was to get a really good exchange for Ben Simmons, which it doesn't look like they're going to do, they'd be considered. And I know a lot of people are high on Miami. The East looks a lot more wide open than the West, because it looks like there's one dominant team in the West, whereas there can be 4, maybe 5 really good teams in the East.
Yeah, because
does that seem fair to say, Sap?
Absolutely. I mean, I think the safe pick is Milwaukee because they've got adults playing for them. So, like Giannis is
and they got
the
juice going for them, right?
And
they have the championship juice.
You get that first championship. Sometimes, they've always said the first million is the most difficult to make. After that, it gets easy. I have no idea how that's done, but that's what I've understood.
The first $20 for you. That's
the first $20 is the most difficult, and then you can get up to 40 quickly thereafter. Right. But they've won it now, so that load is off of Giannis, right? Like now, it's like okay, he's a made man now. Like now,
absolutely,
we see these top 75 players in league history. And he'll be in there. And then we're seeing, I think Kendrick Perkins put out his top 75 players in league history. And he had Giannis at like number 28, which is incredible considering how young he is. Like he's only going to move up those ranks. He's a made man now. He deserves it. He deserves it. He's the best player in the league right now. In my opinion, he's the best player in the league.
I keep saying this, Sap. His best game in the history of his career was the elimination game in the NBA Finals. I mean, that is an unbelievable stat.
Yep. 17 of 19 from the free throw line. He turned a weakness into a strength right before our eyes in a clinching game. That's ballsy. And
only great players elevate their games in that situations. Only the best players do it, and he did it. And I think he answered every question that everybody had about him.
Yep. And I think I like comparisons, cross sport comparisons. I think we're starting to see that
and mediums, movies to sports.
Anything. I do anything. I've often said that Giannis, his football equivalent is Lamar Jackson. We're starting to see more of that with Lamar Jackson. Remember, people said he can't come from behind. What did he do against Kansas City? What did he do against Indianapolis? He came from behind. He's become a better pocket passer, right? More efficient throwing the football. Because both of those guys, I think they have a very similar quality. They want to be great. And they work their butts off to be great. And they're also loved by their teammates. So they're able to do that. I'm not saying the Ravens are going to win the Super Bowl this year to do what Milwaukee did last year in the finals, but I think those are two players that continually get better. And Giannis, to me, is the best player in the league right now because, LeBron and Kevin Durant are right there as well. I think those three guys are clearly the three best players. Now you can go with Steph and Luka and, Jokic and Harden and all the other guys. They all have real weaknesses at some point. Like Steph and Luka are liabilities on defense. I don't think Jokic is a really good defensive player, but Giannis is an elite defender. Like LeBron, when he needs to, could still play really good defense, as can Durant. This kid's an elite defender. He could be
he's won defensive player of the year twice.
Yeah, I mean, look, and one of the biggest plays runs, and he could have won it another time. And one of his biggest plays last year in the NBA Finals was a block. Right? I mean, that recovery block was ridiculous.
That Skip Bayless wasn't very impressed with.
Not impressed, no, because the only other guy maybe in the history of the sport that could have done that was Bill Russell. Like seriously, those are the only two guys I can think of because it takes more than just ability. It takes anticipation and effort and smarts, and also it helps to be. Russell was 6'9", Giannis is 6'11". Like Jordan, Kobe, or LeBron might have been able to do that, but those guys are longer, Russell and of course Giannis. So not an impressive play whatsoever. But he's a guy. So he looks like a guy now. Is like, okay, I got that championship. I want to win again. Now he knows he's a made man. So I still think they're the favorites in the East because you still got the Kyrie Irving situation in Brooklyn. You've got the Ben Simmons situation in Philadelphia. I like what the Heat did in the offseason, but they feel like they're a player short of contending for a championship. I think there'll be a pain in the ass all season. There'll be a pain in the ass in the postseason. They could get to the conference finals, but I just don't see them breaking through that. Look, we both like Jimmy Butler a lot. We both like Kyle Lowry a lot. But if Jimmy Butler is your best player, I don't think you're a championship contender. That's not a slight against him. He's a phenomenal player, but he's not quite at the level of the other players we're talking about.
No, because he can't shoot consistently enough or score consistently enough. He does so many things, and he's talk about an elite defender. He's as good on defense as Giannis.
Absolutely.
But Giannis has the advantage of being a giant dude who can dunk from the free throw line. Yeah, Jimmy Butler can't do that.
No.
But, so with Milwaukee, Sap, they lost PJ Tucker. They added a couple of wing players. Semi Ojeleye, nothing special there. Rodney Hood, Grayson Allen. Where does this roster stand compared to at the end of last season? Do you think that it's around the same, or do you think that those players I just mentioned, do they make up enough to cover for the absence of PJ Tucker, or is it a little bit worse of a roster?
overall, they probably give you a little bit more in terms of depth, but they don't have PJ Tucker. And that's, as you said,
DiVincenzo returns as well because
DiVincenzo returns, and I think he's a really nice player as well. Decent defender, can hit you threes, has a good attitude. But PJ Tucker's a lot. I still don't understand why, if you're a championship team and this guy's a key member of it, you don't bring him back. Like I'm sure there's reason behind it in terms of dollars and cents. I look
there
like
it is. That's the reason behind it.
That's it. But that guy's worth a lot, right? And I think he's going to
someone
go to Miami.
Who does not score at all or put up really
or take a shot.
Statistics.
Yeah.
Remember we were making fun during the finals. His stats were like 0, 0, 0, 35 minutes played.
Somehow,
you're like, huh?
But he drove Kevin Durant crazy, or he drove Devin Booker crazy, or he drove someone crazy because he's such a physical defender, and he's a locker room guy, right? Like
4 fouls. He would pick up the 4 or 5 fouls every game.
Perfect.
That was his stat.
The Celtics won a lot of championships, even before. Well, I was born in 1963. They already won several, but they always had guys like that on their team. Just that sticky role guy. I mean, even the 08 Celtics kind of had Posey and Eddie House, right? They're not great players, but they did what they did. They understood the role that they had to play, and they were team guys. PJ Tucker's the same thing. I'm surprised. I think they're going to miss him because if they get into a series with Kevin Durant, now are you going to have to put Giannis on Kevin Durant? Because they didn't really use him in that role last year. I think that would be a phenomenal matchup, Durant and Giannis going mano a mano, arguably the 2 best players in the league. But PJ Tucker offered you a lot. But I think adding some other pieces gives them some versatility that maybe they didn't have last year, but they're going to miss PJ Tucker. And I think he's going to help Miami.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about Miami, Sap, because I think most people would agree. In fact, I find it very hard to disagree that Miami had the best offseason of any team. They added, obviously, Kyle Lowry, who you alluded to, was sort of the biggest free agent acquisition of any team in the offseason. They added, as you mentioned, PJ Tucker, who fits their culture sort of perfectly there. Let's speculate here, Sap. What's the ceiling for this team? They're not a young team, though they do have some young players, Duncan Robinson, Tyler Hero. They were in the finals in the bubble. Last year was a little disappointing for them. What's the ceiling?
I think they can get as far as the Eastern Conference Finals. In fact, that's where I'm picking them to get to. I think Tyler Hero's primed for a bounce back year. He had a sophomore slump last year. I think he needed to grow up somewhat. And maybe Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry will have that effect on him to keep him focused on basketball.
How Duncan important Robinson, is he to the team, Sap?
He's huge. He's huge. I mean, because he's a guy. He's not only an elite shooter, he can also beat you off the dribble. He's athletic, so you need some of that. Because Duncan Robinson is mostly a catch and shoot guy, and he's one of the best in the league. But Tyler Hero can give
certainly
you
is getting
more.
Paid like it.
He sure Robinson. Is, man.
90 mil.
What a good time to be a great 3-point shooter. Huh? I mean, really. I mean,
and that's all he does.
That's all he does. And he looks like Jeff Howe, who used to work with us at the Herald and now works for the Athletic. I mean, he's a dead ringer for him, except about 8 inches taller. But yeah, I think that Hero's a key guy on this team. You got Bam Adebayo, who's now your 3rd best player, which is perfect. He's an all-star caliber player. Look, Lowry and Butler were like born to play together, weren't they? I mean,
sure.
those guys
they'll love playing together.
Oh my God. And it seems like they're the 2 leaders. It seems pretty loose. We both think Spoelstra's in the argument of being the best coach in the sport. And look, I think Miami's another team that if they see that they're right there, they'll make a move at the trade deadline. I think they can get to the conference finals. Again, a lot depends on the regular season. Like if you have to go through Brooklyn in the first round or the second round and then get to Milwaukee in the finals of the conference, that's tough. How are you going to work through 2 really elite teams? That puts a lot of pressure on them. I mean, Milwaukee, again, like Phoenix, had a little bit of a break last year. Miami wasn't really focused last year. Then after that, they were able to beat Brooklyn. But let's not forget, James Harden was at 60% throughout that series, and Kyrie Irving missed half of the series, and it went to Game 7 in overtime. And Milwaukee prevailed. And then they played Atlanta, which was playing with house money, but certainly wasn't capable of beating Milwaukee. So you need some breaks along the way. Look, the Lakers had breaks 2 years ago. They got to play Miami in the finals, although the East was not very good that year. I didn't really see any team that was going to beat the Lakers in the finals, but they beat Miami. So, but in terms of what their ceiling is, I think they can get to the conference finals. I can't see them getting to the finals. I mean, are you going to beat Giannis in the second round and then Durant in the conference
I
finals or
think
vice versa, that's
they would
tough to
need
ask.
they would need Tyler Hero to become a 20-point a game scorer.
Right.
Because
Yeah.
where they're limited to me, Sap, is what I just mentioned a little bit earlier. I don't see them. I think they might be the best defensive team in basketball. They very well may be.
Yeah.
I don't see them, and that's even with Duncan Robinson starting for them, and that's saying something. I don't see them being able to score enough points consistently.
Mhm.
You've seen Jimmy Butler in big games, can get 40, but then he can also get you, 8, 17, 16.
Or 10. Yeah. I mean,
Or 10.
You can't,
It's just,
you can't count him to be your elite
Adebayo's
scorer, right?
not going to be a 20-point a game scorer. Kyle Lowry, that's not what he does. You're going to need Tyler Hero to be a primary scoring option on the team. If he's capable, whether he's capable of it or not, this is sort of the year to find out. I'm not saying he has to average 20, but he needs to be somebody you could say, we need points tonight. You need to go get us points and be able to do that in a playoff game. That's where I see as their biggest limitation is their scoring. The defense won't be an issue. The other thing that could catch up to them, Sap, is, Butler and Lowry especially have a lot of tread on their tires. I think they could play through it because they're really tough guys and they're in excellent condition. Well, Butler is Lowry sometimes looks a little doughy, but that seems to work for him. I guess at any point the wheels could potentially fall off when you're talking about guys who have played so many games and have been in the league for so long
and played so hard too, right? Like they're not taking time off. That's one thing.
Lowry was taking charges in the All-Star game 2 years ago. He took like 3 charges in the All-Star game.
Yeah, I mean, he and Jimmy Butler. I mean, that was like the perfect match. Like when I saw that signing, I'm like, he's gone to heaven to play for the Heat with Jimmy Butler, and that's one thing I always gave Kevin Durant a ton of credit for. Like the next play Durant took off, Kevin Garnett. The next play that Kevin Garnett took off would be his first. Like the guy played at 100% every freaking game, every play. Like he never saw Kevin Garnett loaf out there. Same thing with Butler, and that can wear on you, obviously. So yeah, those are some of the interesting things. They're going to be a fascinating team to watch. And again, I sound like PJ Tucker's my second favorite player, but he's a winner, and I think he'll help that organization. He'll play defense where Duncan Robinson doesn't. Again, if they're playing Milwaukee or Brooklyn or both at some point in the postseason, he'll bang Giannis around. He'll bang Durant around. I mean, he's not going to stop them. You don't stop those guys, but it'll make them work their butts off and tire them out with his physical strength. So, yeah, I think the ceiling is conference finals, unless they have this magical regular season where they're the number 1 seed and they don't have to beat those 2 teams to get to the finals. And, Brooklyn and Milwaukee meet in the second round and beat each other up. And somehow Miami has a path to the conference finals. But I
don't know how smart it would be for Miami to go all in on the regular season, though.
With those veterans, right. Yeah. I mean, they're probably going to be a 4 seed or 3 seed at best. So, they can kind of navigate that as well. They kind of be in the same bracket, maybe with the 76ers and Celtics and maybe the Bulls. Those teams will be the middle, 3 through 6, which is always, those are teams that are kind of interchangeable, and you see how that works out in the postseason.
Right. So you have them in the conference finals, Sap. Let's talk about the other. I don't think, honestly, this is our show, so we're gonna make executive decisions here. I honestly don't think there's much point in talking about the Sixers or the Nets because we don't really know. We've talked about them all off season. Yeah. I guess the one question I'll ask you then, Sap, about them, and then I don't want to talk about them anymore because I just don't think there's any point. Kyrie Irving, let's say, misses the season. Let's say they can't trade Ben Simmons, I don't know what they're going to get for him. So let's just say he sits out the year. I don't think that's what's going to happen, but let's say he sits out the year. Kyrie sits out the year. Can either of these teams get to the finals or the conference finals without those guys playing? With nothing in return.
Brooklyn can. Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
can Brooklyn win the championship without Kyrie playing?
Yeah. I mean, look, Durant is the most unstoppable offensive force in the sport. I think he works perfectly with James Harden. And we're not big fans of James Harden, but give the man his due. Is there a better scorer, passer in the league than James Harden? Like the combination? I don't think there is. I mean, the guy has led the league in scoring and assists, not in the same year, but in different years.
Right.
And they work so well together. I mean, there's a tremendous harmony with those 2 guys. The rest of the roster is not all that good, but you get to the finals or you get deep into the playoffs, those two guys are going to carry anyway. Yeah, they can get to the finals. Philadelphia, if this Ben Simmons thing gets out of control and they don't get anything in return to him, I see that thing imploding. I think the Celtics and Bulls could finish ahead of Philadelphia. They better move on from Ben Simmons and get something in return. Again, as much as they can, because
how much time do they have to do this, Sap? Can they wait until the trade deadline?
That's a long ways away. Does his now look? He signed for 4 years, $147 million. So it's not like he's going to be a free agent in the summer. So someone can decide to hold out as long as they can to get the best deal for Ben Simmons. So you move him at midseason. Yeah, they could probably wait till the All-Star break. In that,
here's the thing with
area.
him too, Sap, is that if you're trading for him, presumably you're trading, at least somebody halfway decent who's probably pretty popular with players. For a guy, does Ben Simmons have a single friend in the league? Doesn't seem like anybody in the Sixers likes him.
Right.
Don't you have to almost
Kyrie,
talk?
Isn't it?
Don't you almost have to talk to your?
Yeah.
It's different.
No.
Don't you almost have to talk to your players if you're acquiring him, being like, "Hey, is this okay to bring this guy in?"
We're bringing in Harpo Marx,
right? Because he could demo the chemistry of any team.
Sure. Yeah. Kyrie is actually loved by his
he
peers,
is
right?
Well liked. But I can't make heads or tails of why. But he is.
He's a cult leader. It feels like almost he's a cult leader, and then that's what
totally
happens. He is charismatic, and I think the players are enamored with his game. Like I think when basketball players watch other basketball players, it's like actors watching other actors. And
he uses he uses big words, and they're like, "Oh, this guy's smart."
Yeah.
That does not make you smart. That means you know what some words mean.
Yeah, you can go on, Google and you Google words
and
come up with
his Instagram live thing.
Oh, it was ridiculous.
He said nothing.
He contradicted himself 25 times. I mean, it was. If I was advising Kyrie, which would be quite a challenge, but if I was advising Kyrie, I would have said, put together a 2-minute cut. Like craft it out and be coherent. Don't just go on there and just a stream of consciousness.
Word vomit, right?
Yeah, which I have a 2-minute cut where you say, here's why I'm doing this. This is who I'm supporting. I'm not retired. Just hit the bullet points and then just move on from there. Do like a politician does. Instead, he just opened it up and went all over the place to the point where, what did he just say? I mean, you remember Apocalypse Now, the great movie by Francis Ford Coppola. You remember Dennis Hopper's character in that?
Sure.
Dennis Hopper was the photojournalist that, that's who Kyrie reminds me of. It's like, oh my God, he's like, he's in like on another planet. So yeah, that's what I would do with Kyrie. But again, the players like him, right? And I think they respect the hell out of his game, right? I mean, because it's exquisite to watch. And they kind of like, geez, I wish I had that ability. With Ben Simmons, it's like, yeah, he didn't want to shoot. Like, do we even want him on the team? If we pass him the ball and he's wide open with 3 seconds left, he's not taking a shot. He's not going to.
Also, Kyrie's got the signature shoe. He went to Duke. He played AAU with a lot of these guys. Ben Simmons grew up in Australia. Went to LSU. Didn't make the. I don't. Sap. That's why I'm saying why we can't even really spend time on these teams because you just don't know. So we'll move on. Sap. Other teams in the mix for the playoffs in the Eastern Conference. The team that had the best run of any of these teams remaining, Sap, in the Eastern Conference was the Atlanta Hawks. Mm-hmm. Where do you see them finishing this year?
I have them 7th in the East behind. In order, I have the Bucks, Nets, Heat, 76ers with an asterisk, depending on what they do with Ben Simmons. Then the Celtics, Bulls, then the Hawks. I think they take a major step back. I mean, they changed coaches midseason. They caught fire. Everything worked out together. Did really well for them. And they got to the Eastern Conference Finals. But sometimes you'll see teams do that. Remember Portland a few years ago made the conference finals, and then the next year they weren't quite the same. The Nuggets made the conference finals in the bubble. They're still a viable team. The Celtics have done that, and then the next year bounce back and aren't quite the same. So I think the Hawks step back. I also think the Knicks step back too. In fact, I have the Knicks not even making the playoffs because I think the Tom Thibodeau method just tires players out to the point where like the second or third year of this, they're just going to like, it's almost like Buck Showalter. Remember Buck Showalter would manage his ass off and just burn out the players, and then they change managers and win the World Series the next year. It happened twice with him, once with the Yankees and once with Arizona. Thibodeau has that same type of vibe. I think after a couple of years, you're just like, oh my God, this is too much. And I think they fall out of the playoffs as well. So I think the Hawks will still get there, but I don't see them going past first round because I think
Okay,
they're going to finish
so
7th.
let's look at them, Sap. They have a superstar who really emerged himself, and Trae Young, made a name for himself, and I think is going to be one of the biggest selling jerseys this year, one of the most popular players in the league, because he was just so dynamic. I mean, Sap, he was appearing at Madison Square Garden at a WWE show to get the boos of the crowd. Like he's leaning into it, which I think is great. They locked up John Collins to a long-term extension. He's a player I think we both like, but probably the more suited as the third best player on a team that has, title aspirations as opposed to the second. They still have some interesting guys. They have a lot of wings. Cam Reddish, I think we both are interested and intrigued by his talent. Danilo Gallinari, Kevin Huerter, a glut of interesting guys. DeAndre Hunter was a very high pick a couple of years ago. So they have guys that could emerge as good players. But it does seem like they certainly, overachieved last year. And when your best player is a sharpshooting guard and your second best player is a guy who's a big, who is, not really a scorer, it's hard for me to imagine that they're going to be competing with the top teams. I mean, I think you saw how easily Milwaukee was able to dispatch them
without Giannis, right? When it was 2 games apiece,
exactly.
Without Giannis, Middleton and Drew Holiday.
Once they took the initial punch, they said, okay, we kind of know how to play against this team.
And as much as I like Trae Young, and I think kids love him, right? Like it's Steph Curry is the most popular player among kids. I think Zion's very popular because they're almost like one-offs. I think that Trae Young could be that guy as well. He's not overly efficient, whereas Curry is efficient. So I think that keeps him at where he is. But
but he's a better passer than Curry.
Oh, without question. Yeah, because Curry gets sloppy as a passer. I mean, I was quite happy in Game 7 of the 2016 Finals when he had 4 turnovers in the fourth quarter.
That's the one where he threw one behind his back out of bounds.
Yeah, again,
for no reason.
His football equivalent is Patrick Mahomes can get very sloppy and kind of buy into their brand of, magicians out there. Well, sometimes you don't have to be a magician, just be efficient. But look, Jet, the difference between 4 and 7 in the East might be 4 games, right? So I mean, I'm not down on Atlanta. I just think that sometimes when a team overachieves the next year, they underachieve. It has a way of balancing out. Whereas a team like the Celtics was underachieved last year and made some changes. New coach, a couple of veteran players. They have a ability now to maybe bounce back a little bit. So I've got Atlanta as the 7th team in the Eastern Conference. But there'll be a tough out in the first round if they're playing, whoever. They'll probably take it to 6 games because he's quite capable of winning 1 or 2 games on his own. Trae Young.
Yeah, I think
that's always scary.
You throw a blanket over Boston, Atlanta, Chicago, maybe Indiana, and
Charlotte. I think
it all looks the
Charlotte
same
than most people. But
I was
going to
ask you about
group.
Charlotte.
Yeah.
I mean, they have the reigning Rookie of the Year, which it doesn't translate to wins. But I think people are looking at Charlotte as a team that's on the upswing. Seems like they've drafted well. Seems like they're trying to actually, for the first time ever, build something strategically there. I certainly don't think that they have any chance of being, a realistic contender, but
no,
making the playoffs is a reasonable goal for them.
Yep, absolutely. They got into the play-in last year and lost. And again, I think LaMelo is going to be a superstar. I mean, I put him into the discussion, and maybe at some point he could be the face of the league because he's a little different than his brother. His brother's much quieter, more introspective. LaMelo's a little bit more like his dad. He's very outgoing.
He's got a big personality for sure,
and he's got a great game. I mean, you're talking about a guy who I think is going to be a 24, 25 points per game scorer, but also will give you 7-8 rebounds, 7-8 assists. I mean, he can be a really good player.
Yeah, well, he's a much better 3-point shooter than his brother.
And his brother's gotten better.
His brother has improved. He changed his form, and that helps a lot.
Which someone should just show the tape of him to Ben Simmons and say, look, it can get done.
One guy cares and one guy doesn't.
One guy doesn't care, right? Same thing with Lamar Jackson. And I keep bringing up Lamar Jackson. I think he's the front runner for league MVP in the NFL. Here we are in late October, but he's worked on his craft. Like, there's nothing that says you can't work on your craft.
But Ben Simmons doesn't give a crap.
He doesn't care, right? He doesn't, like, Giannis has probably shot 500 free throws every day in the offseason. And he's probably fueled by, hey, I went 17 for 19 in game 6 of the finals. I'm going to become an 80. I'm going to become an 80% free throw shooter. You watch me. I mean, that's the great players. They take the little bit of doubt that someone has on them, and it could be one fan in the stands or one guy on a blog or whatever, and they just run with it. Tom Brady's made a career of this, right? I mean, it's just Michael Jordan, we remember his Hall of Fame speech. He was still pissed at his JV coach. Like, these guys are, they're wired differently. And I think Giannis is got that in him. Like, he just wants to get better all the time. With Ben Simmons, you're right. He's like, I got a big contract. I got a beautiful house. I've dated all these hot women. Great life. Like, who cares? And that's not what you want on your team.
It's in talking about Charlotte again. I really love the backcourt of Ball and Rozier. I think it's a very interesting backcourt. Can LaMelo Ball? Are you okay with him being a primary scorer? Do you think he can be a primary scorer on a team, or is he? I'm not saying that's nothing to do with best player or not. But I'm saying I think he be the guy that you want points out of. Yeah,
I think he. Like I said, I think again, not this year necessarily, because it's only his second year and he's 20. So, but I think
you don't see that a lot out of point guards right now, because Lillard and Curry are, they're gunners. Right. I wouldn't say LaMelo Ball is a 3-point bomber like those guys.
But he's big. He's 6'8", right? I mean, he's 6'7", 6'8", so he can do some things that Dame and Steph can't do. And obviously they do things he can't do either, like shoot from 35 feet like it's a layup. But he can do some things because of his size. I think he can end up being a 24, 25 point per game scorer. Not necessarily this year, but I think him and Rozier can work well together because they can do a lot of things.
Well, I think that
it's not the
Ball
is point guard, shooting guard.
He's a willing passer.
Oh, he's a phenomenal passer.
Rozier's not.
No, Rozier's looking to score.
But they put him at a two guard spot, which is he's much more. The Celtics were trying to play him point guard. His size indicates he should be a point guard, but he's a scoring guard, so he should be a 2.
Jet, I'm going to show my age here. The Lakers in 1979, when they were able to draft Magic Johnson with the first pick, they had Norm Nixon, who was an all-star point guard, and it worked to win 2 championships. And then finally, I think Magic and Norm Nixon had a falling out. They traded him. Magic was the point guard at 6'9", and Norm Nixon became the shooting guard at 6'1". I mean, the sizes don't necessarily dictate what position you play. Like, I've always
it's mentality and skill.
It's a mentality. What was Allen Iverson? I know he's 5'11".
He was listed as a point. He was a 2, but he was a 2, point guard, right?
Steph, I mean, Steph.
I don't really know what to call him.
He's a guard. He's a guard, right? Guard. Like Isaiah Thomas, point guard, but he could score. Right. Jordan and Kobe were like the classic 2s. These guys.
I think that Iverson's a perfect example. Like, listed him as point guard, definitely wasn't a point guard. Was a guard.
Yeah, he was a guard. He was a basketball player. He was a force of nature. Like Westbrook. I mean, we think of him as a point guard, but should the point guard be getting 12 rebounds a game? Like, it's positionless now. So, but I like that theory you have with LaMelo will be more of the primary ball handler and set up Rozier. But I think LaMelo could be a guy that I think not this year. He's, again, only 20 years old, but when he's getting into his prime, you're looking at 24, 25 points per game to go along with 7-8 assists and 7-8 rebounds. He's damn good. I'm
the weird fit on this team, Sap, is Hayward, who's their highest paid player by far. Yep. But and when he was healthy last year, which he seldom was playing very well. I almost feel like he's a guy that they should look to trade if they can get something out of him, because like the timeline of they have a bunch of guys who have potential. PJ Washington, Miles Bridges. They drafted James Bouknight out of UConn, who's a high prospect. Does Gordon Hayward really fit on this team? It seems like the whole vibe is different.
He never seems to fit in, right? I mean, he came to the Celtics, and the Celtics. And
again, he was good
Tatum.
when he played last year. I'm not.
He's a good player. I mean, he does everything on the court, right? He's a really good passer, decision maker, athletic, can score, decent defender. I mean, he's a guy who can do a lot of things out there on the basketball court, but it almost seems like he keeps showing up on teams that they have someone younger and cheaper than him, right? This happened kind of in Boston with Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. Like, if the Celtics knew that Jason Tatum was going to be this good, they drafted him with the 3rd pick in the draft in 27. They wouldn't have signed Hayward, because they would have said, okay, Tatum is going to be as good as him.
It's younger, cheaper, higher ceiling, right?
You're right. So it's like, so why would you would have signed someone else or saved the money for a year later? But but in certain markets, there's all this pressure. Like, it was a fait accompli that Gordon Hayward was signing here because of of Brad Stevens. It was like a done deal. Like, that was not surprising. It was anticipated that he was going to sign here. So yeah, I think Charlotte could be interesting. I think they'll sneak in the playoffs, and I think the Knicks are going to step back. I mean, it was a magical year for them.
I agree with you there, Sap. I mean, they added Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier. They had a big offseason, but
yeah, those guys now are more names than
last year.
Yeah, I mean, how are they going to? I mean, and that's a team that's built on defense, and really, the Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier, your two signings.
You don't think those guys are good at defense?
Man, I think you and I could score on them.
I don't know how Evan Fournier translated his Celtics tenure, the back half of the season, to getting a big contract, because he was god awful when he was with the Celtics.
He must have a good agent. I mean, seriously, or just sometimes
a really good agent.
Sometimes a team gets impressed with a guy, and they look at his skill set. And look, every coach in the league thinks they can make the player better, right? So Tom Thibodeau, the front office of the Knicks are like, well, in our system with our players, Fournier, he might work well with Julius Randle, who's a good playmaker. Julius Randle became like a point power forward and averaged 6 assists a game last year, which is outstanding.
It made an All-NBA team, right?
Made an All-NBA team. And I've always liked Julius Randle. You know that I think the first time we met, we were debating, Marcus Smart or Julius Randle. And I've always been a Julius Randle guy.
Marcus Smart might make an All-NBA team this year.
All defense, right? Maybe.
Nope. All NBA. He's gonna average 20
all
points.
NBA. He's gonna. Okay, there you go. He's gonna be him, not Jason Tatum. Will make the All NBA team. Yeah. That seems to be that's a hot take, Jet. Save that, we'll play that again in June when the teams come out. But yeah, overall, I mean, look, the East is going to be interesting. I've got Milwaukee getting back to the finals and beating the Heat in the conference finals. I just think that the Nets thing is going to be suffocating for them, and then unless they can move Kyrie and get a specter
of Kyrie,
Kyrie,
the guillotine. He's like the guillotine hanging over there. Really, is what he is.
I mean, if they can move him, and look, now that Durant and Harden are on board with that, because you could see from last week.
I think they are at this point, right?
Well, they asked Harden about it, and he goes, "No, I haven't talked to him," and he kind of just walked away. I mean, I think, and Durant's not saying that
he keeps saying, "I believe he's going to be here at some point." What?
Harden is not going to say that unless Durant signs off on it, right? So now if Durant's fine with moving Kyrie because they're just tired of him, maybe they can get something in return for him.
Do you think Durant's like, why did I tie my future to this psycho?
Instead of Steph Curry, right? Instead of just staying in Golden State.
Or anybody. And somebody stable.
Right. Yeah, I mean, he could have went to the Knicks by himself.
Sap, you're a historian of sports. You're older than me, so we'll default.
That's well documented.
Has there ever been a less reliable star player than Kyrie Irving?
Oh God! I mean, there's guys that were really talented. Like Marvin Barnes was a guy who was a star at Providence, played in the ABA, had a skill set, Jet, that was Hall of Fame worthy. I mean, ask your dad about.
No, I know bad news Barnes. I know who he was.
This guy was redefining the power.
Providence guy, right?
Yep, Providence. I mean, this guy was dripping with talent. I mean, there's no question in my mind if he had been focused, he would have been 24-12. I mean, he would have been probably the best power forward in the NBA for 8-9 years.
On that top 75 list, maybe.
He had that type of talent, and he just was unreliable. I mean, he showed up one night at the Garden in the middle of the game wearing a mink coat, carrying a bag of McDonald's. And
I've heard that story.
Yeah, and then they were like, they put him in the game, and he had like a double-double. I mean, the guy was loaded with talent. So he's probably one guy that you think of. I mean, it's just the thing is, Kyrie still put up phenomenal numbers, though.
He's crippling teams, Sap. That's the thing. And I know this is going a little bit off track, so we won't spend a lot of time on it. But
I know we keep talking about we're not going to talk about the Nets.
Destroyed the Celtics, and look what he's doing to the Nets. Were the championship contenders by a mile, the championship favorites.
He's played with the two best players of this era. Right, he played with LeBron James, played with Kevin Durant, who I think now LeBron, I think in some sense is the easiest superstar to play with because he's a great leader and all the pressure falls on him. He can be difficult to play with because I think he's demanding, right? But if you're as good as Kyrie Irving, you should be able to deal with that.
They had very conflicting personalities.
Exactly, because Kyrie thinks he's better, which again, you can think that, but it's not true. Durant, to me, appears to be one of the easiest superstars to play with. He just wants to play basketball, do his thing. I mean, he doesn't seem to be high maintenance in terms of on the court. Off the court, he's fighting with everybody on Twitter, but he couldn't manage himself with those two guys.
No, I think the thing is, with LeBron, is that LeBron has interests outside of basketball as well, like Kyrie does. I don't know how much Kevin Durant does, but I think that Kyrie always thinks he's the smartest person who walks into a room, and maybe he's smarter than LeBron, maybe he's not. I don't know the answer, but the fact that LeBron gets attention for doing stuff outside of basketball, I think drove Kyrie crazy because he's like, that's my thing.
Yeah.
And the people talk highly about LeBron off the basketball court, I think drove him bananas. Or that LeBron would sit, like talk to Kyrie like he was, younger than him. I think it made him really, really hate LeBron.
There are people, I think, when we saw that they were going to be together, we expected the mentor protege relationship, right? Which look, I've had those. They're difficult. And it didn't work out. I think LeBron wanted to be the big brother and look out for him. And Kyrie's not that guy. Kyrie's not the guy that needs that. Anthony Davis is a different personality,
though, Sap. When you're the best player in the world, I don't think there's having a protege. I just don't, because you can't teach all your skills to that person. Can't.
No, because at some point, Jet, the protege,
he might want to have it, but I don't think he could do it.
It is difficult. It is, because at some point the mentor wants the protege to surpass him. Right. That's like, it's almost like your dad want you to be better than him. Right. Sure. That's like what parents do. So that's the mentor protege relationship. I've been a mentor to kids, and I want them to be better than me. I get a kick out of that.
He's operating off a completely different plane of existence.
No one's better than him. Like, I mean, and maybe that, you bring up a really good point, Jet. Maybe that has something to do with LeBron and Michael Jordan not vibing, right?
Because Jordan never wanted to do that.
No, Jordan's only protege was probably Kobe.
Yeah, but he
knew Kobe was never going to be better.
Right.
No, he was no threat. Exactly. That's the thing. Whereas LeBron's a threat. So yeah, that's an interesting. The psyche of that is when you're that good. Like, okay.
Well, how about this, Sap? Jordan had brothers, and LeBron didn't.
LeBron's an only child.
LeBron, I think, was looking for that brotherhood. Jordan had it already in his family.
Jordan had it already. Yeah. I've said this a million times. Your family dynamic is so important. Where LeBron came from, only child. His mother was 15 when she had him. To come where he came from is incredible. Like the physical skills he's born with, and he's developed them, and he's all of that. But to do what he did from where he came from is amazing. Jordan grew up in a middle-class house, 2 parents, older brothers, siblings that he had that great sibling rivalry with, but a lot of love. LeBron never had that. So yeah, LeBron, look, I'm the youngest in my family. By a long stretch. The closest in age to me is 8.5 years older than me. Yeah. I was a mistake, obviously. So, and some people say I'm still a mistake. I'm very happy mistake. It was my dad's 38th birthday present, Jet. Look, I mean, do the math. I was born on April 25th. His 38th birthday was July 25th. Do the math. It's 9 months. I showed up exactly 9 months later.
That's a coincidence.
What happened? But I've always kind of wanted younger brothers. That's why I really vibe well with younger people. Like you and a bunch of people I've worked with are all younger than me. And I've always kind of connected with millennials because I've always kind of probably wanted a younger brother.
What we don't have, you never had. Right. I mean, that's
you're
a
the
very
oldest
basic
in your family, right? So
desire.
Yeah, you're the oldest in your family. So you're probably looking for maybe someone older that you can connect with.
Well, I had 2 sisters, so I was always looking for a brother.
You were looking for a brother. I have 2, but we also have a different dynamic. This has turned into like the Freud hour here. But but I have 2 sisters as well. One who passed away, but they were my best friends. So
right.
I think
same with my sisters.
Yeah, I think it's so cool when you have like I have a lot of friends that never had sisters. I'm like, you missed a lot because they really make you whole. Tom Brady, 3 older sisters, right? Yeah. So I think that's why he's such a giving guy. Aaron Rodgers, middle child, doesn't speak to his 2 siblings, doesn't speak to his parents. Different dynamic. He's the middle child, which normally the middle child of 3 boys is going to be the alpha. And going to resent the older one because he was the first one and going to resent the cute young one and kind of goes on his own. And that's kind of sums up Aaron Rodgers. Tom Brady, much more giving, right? Because you get 3 older sisters and has a great relationship with them and a great relationship with his parents. I mean, I love examining the psyche of athletes because it's so fascinating.
Sure. I mean, I think we've done a good job and we'll continue to do it over the course of the season because especially with NBA players, because they are so open and stuff and we know so much about them. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of material to work with. I mean,
wasn't Dwayne Wade kind of LeBron's big brother? I mean, they're only about 3 years apart in age,
I think that's how what LeBron wanted him to be.
And Wade is such a good leader that he kind of accepted it. And Wade is very malleable, like Steph Curry. Like Steph Curry's to be the second best leader in the sport because he understands it's like, okay, maybe Kevin Durant's not as secure as I am, but I'm going to let him be the guy. And at least
but also
let him
remember
think
with Wade
he's the guy.
was his same draft class, so sort of his peer, but a little bit older, but also the first person he ever played with who was even remotely close to as good as he was.
Remotely close to good.
Right. I mean,
he played with Shaq. I know that
had something to do with it too. I think he's like, okay, I can actually talk to this guy and he's understanding what I'm talking about.
I could throw him
we're reading the same book here, whereas LeBron in Cleveland, his first stint was reading War and Peace. The rest of the team was reading Green Eggs and Ham. So it's I think it's different. But again, we got off track here, Sap. Let's wrap up the show with this.
Yep.
Predictions for who the conference finalists, NBA finals, who's going to win it all, and who's going to be MVP of the league.
Okay. In the Western Conference, I have the Lakers over the Mavericks. I'm not 100% sold on the Mavericks. I'm just figuring that Luka continues to just get great. I'm absolutely sold on Luka. Once LeBron hangs him up, hopefully not for another 5 years, I think Luka's going to be my favorite player in the league. I'm just hoping that Mark Cuban in the front office sees that they're making progress and make a move at midseason to put them over the top. So I'm going to go with the Mavericks in the Western Conference Finals, but losing to the Lakers. In the East, I'm going to go the Bucks over the Heat. I just think that the Kyrie thing is just going to suffocate that franchise. And I think that the Heat somehow can beat the Nets in a playoff series because they're so mentally tough with the makeup of that team. But I still think the Bucks are better. So I have the Lakers and the Bucks in the finals, and I have the Lakers winning. I think that, again, LeBron is the best at putting things together that other players just can't do. And this is quite a task for him. And this would be, I think, perhaps his most incredible championship, because
depends who he plays in the finals.
It depends who he plays in the finals, but also the fact that no one thinks that Russell Westbrook can be part of a championship team. If he can get him to buy into this, look, Russell Westbrook played with Durant, played with Harden, played with a lot of great players, wasn't able to break through. And now if he breaks through at an advanced age, this is going to be a real feather in the cap for LeBron James. And it would give him his 5th championship. And if the Red Sox win the World Series, since he's 2% owner of Fenway Sports Group and 2% owner of the Red Sox, he will already surpass Michael Jordan as an owner. So, that debate can continue. Yeah, so I like to bring that into it. But I have the Lakers over the Bucks in the finals, which I think would be a pretty cool finals. I mean, Lakers-Nets is what the networks would love to see with all that star power. But Giannis continues to get better, and they'd be the defending champs, and it would be LeBron and Giannis. That would be quite the matchup. But in the end, Anthony Davis would be the difference, because I think he's going to have a monster year.
Yeah, I in the West have the Lakers over the Nuggets, as I alluded to earlier. I will see what happens with Jamal Murray, but I like that big three as the second best. I think they have the second best roster in the West. And then in the Eastern Conference, Sap, I'm going to have, I'll say Brooklyn over Milwaukee. Based off of, I think Brooklyn was going to, if James Harden was at 20% last year, I think they would have beaten Milwaukee. He was at like 5%. So even without Kyrie, I like Brooklyn in the East. I think they'll come out of it, but I'll take the Lakers overall, which, makes me feel nauseous saying that. But I love what they did this offseason. I think they addressed every need they had. You cannot underrate the additions. People aren't talking about the additions enough of Nunn and Monk.
Right.
As 2 3-point shooters, good 3-point shooters, guys who don't have a lot of tread on their tires either, young guys who can score, who LeBron can set up if they come off the bench. Their bench is good. The Lakers bench is really good. And that's the depth that they have is going to be able to keep them with good seeding in the West and going to be able to keep LeBron and Anthony Davis fresh. And Westbrook, whether he fits in or not, I think is irrelevant, because I don't think he's going to be, if he doesn't fit in, I don't think he's going to be enough of a negative to hurt the team. So I think no matter what, he's going to help based on what they had last year. So I like the Lakers a lot to win the title. Unfortunately, as a Celtics fan, I really and by the way, we didn't talk about the Celtics much because we're going to be talking about them all season. So we'll do more Celtics preview stuff, as the days come out. We're based in Boston, so we're going to be talking plenty about the Celtics. So if you're waiting for that, don't worry, we'll get you covered very soon. As far as MVP of the league, Sap, who you got?
My second runner-up for MVP will be Giannis. I think he's going to have another monster season. He's going to have an MVP-worthy season, but again, he's won it twice. So oftentimes in the NBA, it's about the story, the narrative. So I think he'll finish third. I think Anthony Davis is going to have a monster year. He's in tremendous shape. I think he took seriously what happened to him last season when he wasn't in shape. I think he's going to be the benefactor of all of that depth that the Lakers have. I think he's going to put up 27 and 12 and be a contender for Defensive Player of the Year. But in the end, I think Luka's going to be the MVP. He was the favorite last year. Look, Luka's quite capable of going 30, 10, and 10. If he did that, I would not be shocked. So I think he'll be the MVP, provided that the Mavericks are in contention. Although Westbrook won an MVP when the Oklahoma City Thunder were 5th or 6th in the Western Conference. And
yeah, that team was terrible. He dragged them.
Yeah, he kind of dragged them. So maybe have the same type of thing in Dallas. So yeah, I think it goes Luka 1, AD 2, and Giannis 3.
Okay. I almost want to say Joel Embiid here, Seth, because I feel like he's going to have such a chip on his shoulder. If you've been watching his press conference, he freaking hates Ben Simmons. I mean, he is pissed off, and a pissed off Joel Embiid is scary. I just don't think he's going to be able to get through the season. If he plays the requisite amount of games, I think he'll win MVP. If he plays
65 to 70 games, he can
65 to 70.
He finished second last year and he missed 20 out of 70.
He would be my favorite. But
I
don't think he's going to make it. That, he hasn't shown that he can. So right. I'm gonna go with what you're saying, Seb. I agree with you on Luka. I think he's the best bet, the safest bet to win MVP. But my dark horse special would be Embiid for sure. Yeah, because I think he's going to put up crazy numbers, and I think he's pissed off. If the guy plays better pissed off, which I've seen him do before, look at the numbers he put up last year. He's, to me, the most unstoppable force in the NBA when he wants to be.
Yeah, Durant's they're different, right? I mean, Durant to me they're different. I mean, this is about the only thing I can say. I mean, Durant to me is the most unguardable guy and maybe in the history of the sport. He has more answers on the offensive end than anyone I've ever seen play, and that includes Michael Jordan and Kareem and name everybody else. But yeah, unstoppable in the way that Shaq was unstoppable.
Yeah, I mean, nights, listen, with Durant, they're very rare, but some nights your shot can just be off. With Embiid, when you can play in the post like that, it doesn't matter. Yeah. You're dunking the whole time. So that's why Shaq, I say it. Listen, he's not better than Kevin Durant. Don't get me wrong.
No one is in terms of that ability, right? Even LeBron is not Kevin Durant when it comes to needing a bucket. The guy just has more answers than anyone. But Embiid is the closest thing we've seen to Shaq. In fact, Shaq has said that. Right, Shaq is all on board that Embiid's more talented than he was, and Shaq doesn't throw compliments around, but he feels that Embiid is that good. Yeah, I mean, when he gets the ball in the low post, he's got the sheer size and strength, but also the footwork. I mean, he's got footwork that's comparable to Olajuwon or McHale's.
You want a real dark horse?
That's scary.
By the way, Sap, I was looking at the rosters, thinking about who guys who could win MVP that we're not thinking of. Paul George.
Yeah, he's finished third before, right? I mean, and he's an elite defender, so that helps. It doesn't mean much, but in the end, you could say, well, this guy plays great defense. No, that's a good one because I think he could. Look, he really impressed me last postseason because he carried that team as far as he could. He put up some huge games. That's a good choice.
Gassed, though. He could be gassed.
And he could get frustrated too, where it's just like, oh my God, I came here to play with Kawhi, and now Kawhi's hurt, and things aren't going too well. The Clippers are going to be interesting to watch to see how they progress without Kawhi. But I'm with you in terms of Kawhi is not coming back unless he's 110% because that's just not the way he's wired, and that's fine. That's his choice.
Yeah. So Luka is both of our picks. He is the favorite to win MVP, so that shouldn't be a surprise. Just quickly before we wrap up, Sap, the MVP odds: Doncic is 1, Giannis 2, Embiid 3. Durant 4, Curry 5, Lillard 6, Jokic 7, LeBron 8, Harden 9, Devin Booker 10. So, anybody else? I know
Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis is the guy that I
bet.
think. Yeah, I think. I mean, for the price, if he's say 20 to 1 or whatever it may be,
I will tell you right now, he is plus 2,500.
Oh, that's a great bet. Because again, he seems to have really taken the offseason seriously, and I don't think he did last offseason. He's got the championship behind him, and I think LeBron is going to really get to him that you can be the guy here. With all this talent on the team, you're the guy that's right in his prime. You can be the man. And he played great in the postseason 2 years ago. Again, with him, it's health, right? And sometimes commitment and want to. If he's got all that in place, the man is scary. I mean, he's a scary player to try to deal with. That to me is the best bet on the board in terms of
same
value.
odds as Russell Westbrook for what it's worth to you, Sap.
That's
Actually,
crazy.
The same. I'm reading plus 2,500, both of them.
What's LeBron?
LeBron is plus 1,600.
Yeah, I don't even think LeBron cares at this point. I mean, he'd love to win the MVP. He should have won it 2 years ago, but at this point, I think LeBron,
it doesn't make sense for him to do it.
No,
Seth. He's got
they don't need that.
Some.
Yeah, they don't need that. Yeah,
the title means far more to him than it should than the MVP.
Yep. If
he's truly chasing Jordan, the MVPs don't matter at this point.
Nope. At this point, no. If he plays 68 to 70 games, 32 minutes a night, that's all you need from LeBron. I know he's averaged 25 or more per game for 17 straight years. That may be broken this year. He doesn't need to score 25 a game. He may get double digits in assists. Or again, it depends on how things work out with Westbrook. Like, I've always wanted LeBron to play more off the ball a little bit to take some pressure off of him. And I also think him cutting to the basket is truly unstoppable. And we've seen it from time to time. Maybe that will work with Westbrook. I mean, just think of it like a 3-man game with Westbrook, Anthony Davis, and LeBron, where they're just in movement and getting to the basket.
They run the triangle, maybe.
Run the triangle. Bring Phil Jackson out of retirement and run the triangle, or just some sort of weave, right? And get LeBron going to the basket is a scary thought. So, and maybe that'll work with Westbrook. And then you also got Rondo involved, who I think he and LeBron really hit it on the court 2 years ago, because I like, they're two of the 4 smartest players in the league, right? Rondo and LeBron. You throw Chris Paul and I don't know who else. Those are
Marcus
like
Smart.
Marcus Smart. Yeah, exactly. Marcus Smart. Right there. If Marcus can, catch the plane, he doesn't know what time the plane's leaving, but nonetheless, if he gets there, he'll give you that effort. But yeah, so I think that works out pretty well. But yeah, LeBron's won 4. He's probably deserving of 7 or 8 of them. That's done with. Who cares? But the championships is what it's all about. And I think that's what his focus will be.
All right, Sap. Well, that's going to do it for our jumbo-sized NBA preview for the 2021-2022 season, which, again, kicks off tonight in just a couple of hours. We start with the Brooklyn Nets facing the Milwaukee Bucks, and then we end the night, Sap, with your guy, LeBron James, and the Lakers taking on the Golden State Warriors in Los Angeles. So I know you will be glued to the TV tonight, as will I. And we will continue to, just like we did last season, Sap, be here virtually every day talking about the goings on of the NBA.
Yeah. What time? Now the Lakers start at what? 10:30.
Lakers start at 10.
Oh, at 10. Okay. So by then the Red Sox Houston game, which starts at 8:08, should be in the 3rd inning, right? 2 hours in.
Maybe third.
Maybe the 3rd inning.
Second.
Yeah. Maybe second, depending on how many home runs the Red Sox did.
Grand slams. That's all they do now, Sap. They hit grand slams.
Incredible. They hit 3 all regular season. They've hit 3 in the postseason.
It's
like they've hit 3 in this series.
Pretty crazy run. It is. I mean, I picked against them in every series so far.
That's okay.
That's okay. Doing that.
Hey, I think we can agree they probably have the best manager in baseball.
It certainly seems that way.
The only guy I can think of, Jet, who, and I know we've talked about we'll get into hockey probably before we wrap up, but he's the only manager in baseball who is the face of his franchise. Like, if you think of the Red Sox right now, I think Alex Cora. Right? It used to be David Ortiz or Manny or Pedro, whatever.
Him or Bogarts.
But Bogarts, as much as I love him, is not an exciting guy. Like,
no, just even as a player, he's not for a while.
He's been here. He plays. He doesn't play. He's not Mookie Betts. Like, Mookie Betts was, box office. Bogarts is just a damn good.
He's steady Eddie.
Steady Eddie. I mean, I got a lot of Derek Jeter in him.
Yes.
Just like he's like a quarterback. He's like
Well, that was his favorite player, wasn't it, Jeter?
It was actually Andrew Jones. I found that out recently. I thought
it was
pick. Well, because they're from the islands, and I think
I loved Andrew Jones.
Andrew Jones, I think, is a borderline Hall of Fame, the best defensive center fielder I've ever seen. And I got to see Ken Griffey Jr. I've watched a lot of highlights of Willie Mays.
He had a non-human arm.
It was incredible. Like he also was like, every time the ball would be hitting the gap, you're like, that's going to be a triple. And like Andrew Jones, he didn't even have to run after the ball. He was standing there. His instincts in the outfield were incredible.
Yeah,
he's a borderline Hall of Fame. But I think that's Bogart's favorite player. But I know he also, you could tell he kind of models his game after Jeter. They actually throw the ball the same way from shortstop. I think they're both overrated defensively. Like I think Bogarts at some point is going to have to move positions. But I think of the Red Sox, I think of Alex Cora. Like I think of him as the face of the franchise. Like
just like with the Lakers, you think of Frank Vogel.
That's the guy I think of. Yeah, absolutely. Not LeBron or Russell
I made myself laugh.
or anybody. Popovich is probably the only guy in the NBA that's the face of his franchise, right? I mean, I can't think of
probably.
It. And it's an old face now.
Yeah. All right, Sap. So we will talk frequently during the season, just like we were last season. You'll hear a lot from us. And make sure that you follow us on social media at JohnSap25, at Jet Stryer. The show is the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. We are presented by Full Press Coverage. Make sure you check out our YouTube, youtube.com/Jet Stryer. And we will talk to you later, everybody. See ya.